It took exactly 47 seconds for the atmosphere in the Senate hearing room to shift. The fluorescent lights above reflected off the polished mahogany tables, casting rigid lines across the faces of the attendees. Microphones trembled slightly under the weight of anticipation, their cables coiled like silent snakes across the desk. Pens hovered over notepads, poised for action, and the faint scratch of shifting chairs punctuated the low hum of the air conditioning. Every eye was trained on the lone figure at the witness table, Vivek Ramaswamy. The room smelled faintly of coffee and ink, mingling with the subtle antiseptic scent of polished floors. Cameras lined the perimeter, their lenses glinting like watchful sentinels. In the front row, reporters adjusted their headsets, their fingers ready on record buttons. Senators occupied their raised seats, papers neatly stacked before them, gold-trimmed nameplates catching the light. The mood was almost ceremonial, yet beneath the formality pulsed a quiet tension, the knowledge that a single misstep could redefine a career. Crockett entered quietly, his dark suit crisp, a leather-bound folder tucked under one arm. He approached the podium with calm precision, his gaze sweeping the room, noting every subtle gesture, the slight tremor of a senator's hand, the nervous tap of a pen against a notepad, the deliberate inhalation before a question. His reputation preceded him, a relentless investigator, meticulous and unflinching, known for exposing contradictions hidden within mountains of documents. Today, he was here to unravel not just a story, but the truth behind a $5 million deal. Vivek shifted in his chair, his expression controlled but tense, eyes darting to the folder Crockett had set on the table before him. The deal in question was complex, entangled with political donors, corporate contracts, and subtle financial loopholes. It was the kind of arrangement that could withstand casual scrutiny but would crumble under methodical questioning. The air seemed to thicken as Crockett's voice cut through the silence, low and measured, framing the first inquiry. "Mr. Ramaswamy," Crockett began, "can you account for the transfer recorded in June under the Appropriations Act disclosure requirement?" The room absorbed the question in near-perfect silence. Cameras clicked softly, capturing micro-expressions, a twitch of the eyebrow, a tightening jaw, a flicker of sweat on the temple. Senators exchanged quiet glances, leaning slightly forward, pens poised to annotate every response. Ramaswamy nodded, offering a brief, measured reply that seemed rehearsed, too polished for genuine transparency. Yet Crockett's eyes remained fixed, searching for the slightest inconsistency, the hidden hesitation that could reveal more than words ever could. The chandeliers above diffused light across the room unevenly, highlighting the sheen of polished surfaces, the slight scuff of leather shoes against the marble floor, the almost imperceptible vibration of microphones as the air vibrated with tension. Every element, the angle of a glance, the shuffle of documents, the cadence of speech, was magnified, cinematic in its intensity. Outside the hearing room, the corridors of power were already alive with speculation. Journalists whispered in huddles, aides consulted quietly over phones, and the faint echo of hurried footsteps bounced against marble walls. Within the room, however, time seemed elastic. 47 seconds had already passed since Crockett's first question, yet it felt like an eternity. Each tick of the clock accentuated the stillness, magnifying the weight of accountability pressing down on the witness. Crockett closed the folder gently, letting the paper settle with a soft whisper. He allowed a brief pause, letting silence fill the air, letting the room feel the unspoken stakes. Every observer understood this was no ordinary hearing. Today, law, morality, and political consequence converged on a single moment of truth. But the silence wasn't over yet. The room held its collective breath as Crockett leaned slightly forward, hands folded on the mahogany table. His tone was measured, almost conversational, but each word carried the weight of scrutiny. Senators mirrored his intensity, their questions deliberate, surgical, aiming to expose any crack in the carefully constructed narrative. "Mr. Ramaswamy," began Senator Whitmore, voice calm yet edged with authority, "can you confirm the exact date the $5 million transfer was initiated?" Ramaswamy paused, fingers lightly drumming the folder in front of him. His eyes flicked to Crockett, then downward to his notes. "Yes, Senator." "It was June 14th, he replied smoothly, though a subtle twitch in his jaw betrayed tension. "And the entity receiving the funds," Crockett interjected, voice steady, "was it fully disclosed in accordance with the Ethics in Government Act, Section 102? Or was this routed through a shell corporation? The room responded to the question with silence heavier than before. A pen slipped from a senator's hand, clattering softly on polished wood. Reporters leaned forward instinctively, microphones inching closer, capturing the faintest tremor in Ramaswamy's voice. He hesitated. The recipient, yes, it was disclosed. Standard procedure. Standard procedure, Crockett repeated, eyes narrowing, or procedural oversight. His words were calm, almost polite, yet the implication was clear. The distinction could define legality or illegality. A murmur passed among the aides. Senators shifted, elbows brushing the edge of the table, eyes flicking toward notes they hadn't read aloud. The tension was kinetic, electric, yet unspoken. Every flick of the wrist, every darting glance was amplified in the room's quiet intensity. Senator Levin interjected, leaning back, voice deliberate. Under the Federal Appropriations Act, Section 106(b), any allocation exceeding $1 million requires prior disclosure to the Senate Finance Committee. Were these protocols observed? Ramaswamy's eyes darted again, this time to the ceiling, tracing the fluorescent lines overhead. To my understanding, yes. All protocols were observed, he said, but the cadence was uneven. A bead of sweat slid imperceptibly along his temple. Crockett leaned closer, voice dropping, controlled, and can you explain why internal memos, dated May 30th, indicate funds earmarked for this transfer were withheld from both committee review and the Office of Government Ethics? Specifically, Memo 42B, subsection 3C. The folder trembled slightly in Ramaswamy's hands. Silence swallowed the room. Microphones picked up the faint scuff of his shoe against the marble, a shiver of tension running through the room. Reporters scribbled furiously, capturing every pause, every flicker of doubt. Mr. Ramaswamy, Crockett said, softer now, deliberate, are you aware that withholding information under these statutes could constitute a direct violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 1001, knowingly making false statements to federal officials? A cold sweat settled across Ramaswamy's brow. His response was measured, but the tremor in his hands betrayed the weight of the accusation. I believe all statements were accurate, Senator. Crockett didn't respond immediately. Instead, he observed the slight contraction of Ramaswamy's pupils, the tension in his shoulders, the way his notes were repeatedly straightened yet never referenced. Every micro-behavior was a narrative of unease, a cinematic tableau of impending exposure. Even the room's architecture seemed complicit in amplifying the moment, light bouncing off polished brass, the soft echo of distant footsteps down marble corridors, the hum of cameras capturing the unfolding drama. Each second elongated. Something didn't add up, and everyone knew it. The subtle hum of the cameras receded into the background as Crockett's questioning shifted into quiet ferocity. It was no longer just about the $5 million, it was about the patterns, the gaps, the discrepancies buried in spreadsheets and memos. He reached into his leather folder and pulled out a set of internal documents, letting them fall onto the polished mahogany table with a muted weight. The soft rustle of paper seemed disproportionately loud in the otherwise still room. Mr. Ramaswamy, Crockett began, voice steady, almost conversational, these internal budget memos, dated between May 12 and June 2, indicate an allocation for Project Orion that was never reported to the Senate Finance Committee. Can you clarify why these figures were omitted? Ramaswamy shifted uncomfortably, the leather chair creaking beneath him. He opened his folder, flipping through notes as if the answer could be found between the pages. The documents were preliminary, he said, voice carefully neutral, subject to internal review. Crockett's gaze remained fixed, unyielding. Preliminary or intentionally withheld. The distinction hung in the air, as precise and dangerous as a scalpel. Senators' pens hovered mid-air. A small bead of condensation formed along the water glass before Ramaswamy, sliding imperceptibly toward the base. The documents were more than numbers, they were threads of contradiction. Memo 57C referenced an undisclosed account routed through an offshore trust, flagged under FISA 702 protocols for review. The Appropriations Act, Section 106(b), explicitly required disclosure before any movement of funds exceeding $1 million. Yet here was evidence of funds moving, memos drafted, approvals stamped, and no record submitted. Senator Levin interjected, calm but precise, "Mr. Ramaswamy, according to the Office of Government Ethics, all allocations over $2 million require direct reporting and certification. Are you claiming these memos were compliant?" Ramaswamy's hand trembled slightly as he adjusted the folder. "To my knowledge, yes, Senator," he replied, though the uneven cadence betrayed uncertainty. Crockett's lips pressed into a thin line, noting every micro-expression. Eye flicks, swallowed breaths, subtle hand adjustments, all cinematic indicators of internal conflict. "Let's examine the timeline," Crockett continued, sliding a page forward. May 30th, Memo 42B, subsection 3C, earmarks funds for transfer. June 1st, internal audit flags missing disclosure. June 14th, funds transferred. Can you explain the discrepancy? The silence that followed was almost tactile. Cameras recorded every millisecond. Ramaswamy's eyes darted toward the ceiling, tracing the fluorescent lines, as if seeking an escape route. A faint tapping sound, pen against wood, punctuated the tension. Reporters leaned forward instinctively, capturing each hesitation. "Are you aware," Crockett asked quietly, "that failing to disclose these transfers may constitute a direct violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 1001, as well as breach the Appropriations Act reporting clause? That it exposes you to potential perjury charges." The room's stillness thickened. Ramaswamy swallowed hard, a microsecond too long, signaling the struggle to reconcile words with the documents before him. Crockett allowed a pause, letting the evidence breathe in the room, each page of the memo a silent witness to the contradictions. Every visual detail reinforced the narrative: fluorescent glare on polished brass, the slight vibration of microphones capturing every nuance, the shuffle of papers, the faint scrape of shoes against marble. The tension was cinematic, legal, and moral all at once. The numbers were undeniable, the trap had closed. It began with a subtle shift in posture, almost imperceptible. Ramaswamy's fingers twitched against the edge of the mahogany table, knocking lightly against the folder that Crockett had laid out. The fluorescent lights overhead cast sharp, unforgiving lines across his forehead, highlighting beads of sweat that formed at the temple and trickled toward his collar. In those moments, the room seemed to contract, every observer acutely aware that the veneer of control was fracturing. Crockett's voice was calm, deliberate, measured. "Mr. Ramaswamy, under the Ethics in Government Act, Section 102, and the Appropriations Act, Section 106(b), all financial transfers over $1 million must be disclosed to the appropriate oversight committees. Your internal memo suggests deliberate withholding. How do you reconcile this with your sworn testimony?" The answer should have come smoothly. It did not. Ramaswamy's eyes darted to the senator's pens, the ceiling lights, even the camera lenses. He swallowed, a microsecond too long, and his voice faltered. I believe that. 47 seconds. In that precise interval, the room's controlled tension erupted into visible chaos. Crockett's gaze never wavered. Senators leaned forward, pens poised midair, their brows knitting in real-time judgment. Microphones captured every fragmented syllable, every quiver in the voice that tried and failed to bridge the gap between law and improvisation. The cameras clicked, each frame amplifying the unraveling of credibility. For 47 seconds, the legal reality and visual narrative synchronized. Ramaswamy's hesitation was not merely human, it was constitutional. He had violated the Due Process Clause by knowingly presenting statements under oath that contradicted documented evidence. Perjury, concealment under federal disclosure statutes, and breaches of FISA 702 compliance converged in those moments. The collapse was both cinematic and juridical. A hand tremor betrayed further tension. A pen slid from the table, clattering softly yet piercing the silence like a gavel striking stone. Senators shifted in unison, their eyes locked on the unfolding breakdown. Crockett observed every nuance, a shallow breath, a slight contraction of the jaw, the minute flinch at a particularly damning page. These were not theatrical flourishes, they were the visual proof of legal exposure. One senator, voice steady, interjected mid-pause, Mr. Ramaswamy, are you claiming that withholding internal audit reports falls within the protections of the Appropriations Act?
No.
Ramaswamy began, but the sentence fractured. The words hung, incomplete, as his credibility dissolved. The room felt suspended, each second elongated by the weight of scrutiny and the inevitability of consequence. Crockett finally allowed a slight nod, his calmness a stark contrast to the storm unfolding at the witness table. "The evidence does not align with your testimony," he said quietly. "The violations are clear: non-disclosure under Section 106(b), contradictory statements under 18 U.S.C. Section 1001, and failure to comply with FISA review mandates. This is not a matter of perception, it is codified law." For the final heartbeat of the 47 seconds, the room remained silent, capturing the collapse in slow, almost cinematic detail: fluorescent glare on polished brass, pens paused mid-scribble, the subtle quiver in the leather chair, the flicker of the camera lenses documenting every second of legal unraveling. And in that moment, everything changed. Outside the Senate chamber, the corridors were alive with a different kind of tension. Journalists clustered in huddles, phones pressed to ears, notebooks bristling with annotations. News alerts flashed across television screens: Senate hearing shocker, Ramaswamy stumbles under Crockett's scrutiny. Anchors spoke in measured tones, but the undertone was unmistakable: this was historic, unprecedented in its precision and exposure. Constitutional scholars called it the most devastating Senate takedown since Watergate, said a CBS anchor, "I steady on the camera, voice calm yet intense." For 47 seconds, America watched competence collapse. Every word, every hesitation, every micro-expression captured the fragility of accountability at the highest levels. Social media erupted with analysis. Clips of the 47-second meltdown circulated, slowed down frame by frame to emphasize Ramaswamy's every micro-movement, the twitch of an eye, the trembling hands, the faltering cadence. Legal commentators dissected each moment, citing specific statutes: 18 U.S.C. Section 1001, Appropriations Act Section 106(b), FISA 702 review requirements. Threads on ethics violations, financial disclosures, and constitutional implications grew exponentially. Inside the chamber, the aftermath was quieter but no less intense. Senators conferred in muted tones, exchanging annotations and reviewing transcripts. Crockett remained seated, calm, hands folded, his eyes scanning the room as aides shuffled documents silently. The official record had captured the exact sequence, but it was the interpretation, the visual proof of collapse, that would echo across political and public spheres. A senior legal analyst, appearing on multiple networks simultaneously, summarized: "Ramaswamy's testimony, when juxtaposed against internal memos and budget allocations, indicates multiple layers of non-compliance. This is a textbook example of failing to meet fiduciary responsibility while under oath. The implications extend beyond individual liability. This challenges systemic oversight mechanisms, raising questions about disclosure enforcement across federal agencies." Political commentators weighed in with measured commentary. "Washington has long tolerated ambition over prudence," one said, "but rarely does the system provide such a clear, uninterrupted demonstration of accountability." Crockett's methodical precision left no room for interpretation. It was not just a questioning, it was a revelation. Even within the press gallery, the mood was reflective. A reporter adjusted the microphone, scribbling, "Every career has vulnerabilities. Some are exposed quietly, some spectacularly." Today, the Senate witnessed the latter. The hum of camera equipment, the soft tap of keys on laptops, the muted shuffle of papers, these were the soundtrack of a political ecosystem recalibrating itself. Back in offices across Washington, aides typed rapid emails, sending alerts up the chain of command. Law clerks reviewed transcripts for citations, compliance officers flagged discrepancies, and lobbyists recalculated strategy. The implications of the $5 million deal were no longer theoretical, they were public, dissected, and inescapable. The fallout would shape committee agendas, redefine political alliances, and linger in the public consciousness. Crockett's precision had not only exposed a single lapse, it had illuminated systemic fragility. The audience of the nation, already primed for scandal, witnessed not just human error but the intersection of law, ethics, and moral accountability in real time. Washington had watched, and the reckoning had only begun. The Senate chamber, emptied of its usual clatter, held a quiet stillness. Chairs, polished to a reflective sheen, stood as silent witnesses. The microphones, once brimming with tension and accusation, rested in stoic neutrality. Light from the high windows slanted across the mahogany tables, highlighting every subtle scratch and imperfection, evidence of countless hearings past. The room felt smaller now, weighed down by the memory of the 47-second unraveling. Crockett sat back, fingers interlaced, observing the aftermath with restrained satisfaction. He had done what he was trained to do, dissected narrative from evidence, calibrated questions to law, and guided a moment of truth into unavoidable clarity. Yet he was aware, as always, that the spectacle of accountability was a fragile construct. One witness, one folder, one precise question had revealed both human fallibility and systemic gaps, a duality at the heart of governance. The city outside seemed oblivious, the hum of traffic distant and inconsequential compared to the intense gravity that had played out within these walls. News cycles continued, reporters dissecting phrases, gestures, and citations, while political strategists recalibrated alliances based on every nuance of credibility and failure. Yet for Crockett, the lesson was simpler: law, procedure, and moral clarity converge in moments of exacting precision. Truth, when exposed methodically, does not need embellishment. In the quiet corners of the chamber, aides whispered about memos, budgetary oversights, and the potential legal ramifications. Offices drafted internal reviews, committees scheduled follow-up inquiries, and scholars began citing the hearing as an example in textbooks. Each ripple of consequence extended beyond the individual, touching institutions designed to safeguard democracy. It was a reminder that accountability is rarely theatrical, but when it manifests, it resonates with unavoidable intensity. Crockett's gaze lingered on the empty witness table. The chair that had held Ramaswamy now seemed like a monument to a singular lesson: public service demands transparency, and any breach, however subtle, is magnified under scrutiny. The evidence had spoken. The law had clarified. The moral imperative had crystallized. It was a rare convergence where cinematic tension, legal logic, and ethical weight coalesced. As the last reporters exited, cameras stowed, and the room emptied, the chamber retained a solemn dignity. It was a space where ambition, error, and consequence intersected. Every polished surface, every line of fluorescent light, every subtle echo of movement seemed to reinforce the same truth: power unchecked invites exposure, and diligence ensures clarity. Some careers end in scandal. His ended in silence. And as the sun dipped behind Washington's skyline, the chamber, now quiet and empty, seemed to exhale, a reflective pause, a moral punctuation, a reminder that the pursuit of truth, while exacting, endures far longer than the fleeting shadow of ambition.